Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I wanted to do a quick update of the V666 quadcopter, which I reviewed when it first came out. I've had this one since December, and I just sort of wanted to give a sort of 3-monthly update just to sort of say how this quad has performed since having it. So I mentioned in my first video that I've been having some problems with it. The video recorder kept cutting out, the record function kept stopping on its own. It's like, at first I thought this was resetting, but what it was actually doing was it was taking a photo automatically. And so I wasn't really happy with this, and the range was extremely poor as well. Like, I was only getting 50 to 70 meters before I was getting complete dropout, which was useless. You know, I can get much better range with my Hubsan H107D, which fits in the palm of my hand. So I went to Banggood and they sent me one of these replacement modules, and it was still doing it. It was still having the camera problem. So I did another video for them, and they sent me a new camera again and a new receiver board. And upon receiving the new receiver board, I noticed something. This is the new one fitted, and this is the old one here. So that's the same orientation. And I noticed this on my board. There we go. You can see here that there is a wire that is being installed here, and I just thought that was part of the circuit board, but it's not. The board is actually broken. The ground plane has broken off there, and someone has soldered a wire across to bridge these two, and I started to believe that that was some of the issue, because this one had a much longer antenna than this one that turned up. Anyways, I've installed this, and the recording issue, well, it's not completely gone away, but I managed to get enough footage to be able to do a bit more of a review of this camera. So yeah, we'll see that a bit later. So I realized that the camera stopping was all to do with the range, and I think what was happening was when the quad dropped out of range, it sort of not reset the camera, but sent a message to switch the recording off. So what I've done is I've used this straw here and used a bit of hot glue, and that's just to get the receiver away from the motors, because if you've ever seen an FPV camera and the aerial facing close to the motors, you get an insane amount of interference. So that can't be doing it any good. So I've mounted it up here, and I'm getting, well, I've not actually managed to drop out of range. I've taken it up to about 150 to 200 meters, and it's not dropped out of range. And I've managed to get a full flight with the recorder not stopping. However, what I will say though, after 2 of these boards and 3 of those cameras, I'm still getting dropouts with the recording. It's not too much of a problem because I'm using my Mobius to record here, so I've just sort of given up with this camera and unplugged it, so that it seems to be fine when it's unplugged. It's the message that it sends to the camera. I think it'd be nicer, really, if it had a button on the side that you could press and that would start the recording. But anyways, they say this is a HD camera, 720p, but it's a really soft 720p. It's great for what it is for the price, but it's not going to beat my Mobius underneath here. So, yeah, it's been a challenge with this quad. The one thing I will say is I've done quite a lot of flights with it, and the motors haven't packed up yet. So I think definitely removing that foam from the top has increased the lifespan. I have bought a couple of motors spare, but I've not needed them yet. So let's go and check out some flight footage. You may notice in this shot that the quad was slightly angled down, and that is because I'm using the cloverleaf antenna pointed down. And what that does is it lifts the quad off the ground slightly. It protrudes below the legs, which is originally why I fitted those longer legs, but I have taken those off just for this flight. Well, not just for this flight, mainly for storage because it sits quite high, but also the legs weigh about 80 grams, so you sort of suffer on the flight time a little bit. You can have the legs, it's fine. I just took them off for this. This is how I'm flying it now. Now, that interference that we're getting when it's pointed into the sun is not interference. It is literally the sun shining through the blades of the quad, and then the shadow is being cast onto the camera, and it's sort of matching up with the CMOS of the sensor. You'll see here there's the sun. Not quite pointed into it, but you can start to see, there we go, get the lines. It's just a shadow. It's not a problem with the camera, and you get that with all FPV cameras pointed into the sun when they're on a quad. There's not much you can do about it. So this is the 720p stock camera, which I never got to use because the recording kept cutting out, and the recording quality is pretty good, I have to say. It's obviously not as good as a Mobius. It's probably about the same as an 80816. We do get some artifacts here when we point to the sky and it changes the dynamic range. I get kind of like a pinky kind of pigment on the screen, but yeah, it's not too bad actually. You can see here that even though it's an incredibly windy day, it's about 25 miles an hour, we're getting a fairly stable footage. Now, there is a sort of a kind of rocking thing going on with the vibration dampener, and that is just because of the wind, and it's even worse with the Mobius, and that is because the vibration dampener is using really weak rubber grommets, but it turns out that they're that weak for a reason. Because I noticed we're getting this knocking sensation there when we're sort of going into wind, I replaced the rubber grommets with stiffer ones, and I got a lot of Jallo then on the video. So it does seem that Wltoys have done their research, and the weak grommets are there for a reason, but it is a problem when you're in strong wind. You get this knocking effect, which you'll see even more on the Mobius. But you don't get it if you fly in stable weather, so it's literally just the weather conditions. Now, as you can see here, those trees are actually 150 meters away from where I'm standing, so my range issues have been fixed. I'm not using any kind of range booster or anything like that. The TX is modded. You saw my previous video where I modded the antenna, the fake antenna, and added an SMA connector. I think that has also increased the range, because I've not seen many other videos, like say on the V666 even, getting that kind of range, so much happier with the range. I am still getting video cutouts, as I mentioned though, but I did get a full 10-minute flight here with no video cutout, so I'm going to have to do more experiments with that really. And like I say, I'm not really using this footage. I'm using the footage from the Mobius. It is nice just to be able to not have to set a Mobius up and press record and things like that. So it would be nice if I could figure out how to get this work properly, but it's working much better anyways. And like I say, these trees are 150 meters and there's no sign of dropouts at all, nothing. I just wasn't prepared to take it any further than that because I wanted to get a nice flight and to be able to do a review. Now this is downwind and you can see how fast and how knocked about the quad is getting. And yeah, that was that shaky motion that I mentioned. It's just in the wind, and there's been no setup change other than the wind basically from my previous video, which I was getting an insanely clear and smooth video. It's just the weather. But I've been a lot more confident with this quad. Like I say, the motors have been really good. So I think this is where it flips to the Mobius footage. And there you go, you can hear from the sound that you get much clearer sound from the Mobius. However, I do like the sound of the stock camera. You don't really need the sound to be crystal clear, and you get more of a, dare I say it, drone from the microphone of the stock camera, which cuts some of the higher frequencies out in the sound. You can hear the whine of the gears and the motors, but you can see here as this is directly into wind, the Mobius camera getting really knocked about. As I mentioned, it's because the vibration dampener, as the rubber grommets are so weak, the vibration dampener does have some screws in it, and what happens is when the wind batters into the vibration dampener, the screws stop it going to the full extreme, and you get this knocking effect that you're seeing here when the wind is like smashing into it. But yeah, really good footage here from the Mobius. Like I say, this is the wide angle Mobius that I've attached. We get a flip in there, which the Mobius handles really well. It doesn't handle it so well on the stock camera. It's sort of, you get the, it darkens the ground when it points to the sky. But yeah, so you just want to make sure that if you're going to do flips in FPV, which I think those were done in, just make sure you've got some height, which you will anyways, really. But yeah, I don't really do many flips, but it does do it well, and it does it holding all the cameras as well. And this is the stock battery, and I get a 10-minute flight still, so that is a really, really good plus point with this quad, is the flight time is better than any brushless quad that I've seen. And I think if you attach a even bigger battery, you will get even longer flight times. I think there's a battery that you can buy that's 2000 milliamps that you should get 20 to 30 minute flight with, which I've got a few of. But I just wanted to get a good flight in here with this. This is quite risky because it's sort of downwind, the quad's drifting itself towards the trees. I think I just wanted to fly over the trees. So yeah, it's been an absolute pain, this quad, to be honest. We get a lovely dive here, which I think would look better in calmer conditions. The quad does descend really quite nicely considering it's got an auto level. As I mentioned before, the auto level is quite soft. I think I head out to the far trees again here, and what happens is I'm having so much fun, I forgot to look at my timer, and so I'm flying along, and as it does with this quad, when the voltage gets too low, it doesn't warn you, it just completely drops, and I'm on full throttle, and then the quad just drops into the grass. But there you go, that's my 3-month update. It's been a challenge with this quad. Straight out of the box, it's just not worked for me. And so I don't think I recommend it as a beginner quad, but if you're willing to put the time in and the effort and getting all the spare parts from Banggood, which, you know, I would only get this from Banggood because they're fantastic with the spare parts that they've sent me. It's cost more than the quad did initially, but I imagine, like I say, I don't think they wanted to send me another one because it seems that a lot of them are defective parts. So there you go. Cheers for watching, and please subscribe.